I want to get right to it. So we were very excited to see you at the GOP debate, and you were speaking some rare truth that people don't. So I just want to play a little bit of it, and we'll get into it.
That the Great Replacement theory is not some grand right-wing conspiracy theory, but a basic statement of the Democratic Party's platform.
So that's used. Let me say it one more time.
That the Great Replacement theory is not some grand right-wing conspiracy theory, but a basic statement of the Democratic Party's platform.
Okay, so now, when you said that, the Great Replacement theory, how would you define what that is?
Yeah, I would define what I was certainly talking about as a theory that basically says that if you displace certain native white populations in the United States with immigrant populations, that's a path to lasting electoral majorities and electoral victories for the Democrat Party. And that's exactly been a statement of the Democratic Party's intentions for about the last at least 10 plus years. Going back to, I got this philosophy, Jimmy, is when you want somebody's beliefs, a good rule to start with is just take them at their word, that when they say that that's their belief, actually believe them. That's what Joe Biden was saying 10 years ago with Mayorkas by his side, from Stacey Abrams to left-wing publications. They've been saying this for years, that over the long run, this would be a path to lasting Democratic victories. And so I think we should debate it on the merits. Is that desirable or not for the United States of America? But instead of having that debate, what they've managed to do now is to say, as they've often done, oh, no, if you're stating what I'm already advocating for, somehow you're a fringe conspiracy theorist. I reject that. I don't think that's good for our politics. We should be able to have an open disagreement on a policy debate, honestly acknowledging that there is a policy agenda at work, and you can decide whether you think it's a good thing or a bad thing, but at least get the facts on the table of what's actually happening so we can debate it.
Okay, so hopefully I'll be able to interrupt you more to make you feel more like you're on CNN going forward. Yeah. But can
I say one thing?
Sure.
Can I say one thing about CNN since you brought him up? About this topic on the Great Replacement theory, Jimmy, before we move on from it?
Sure.
Yeah. So after that debate stage, actually in the spin room, I went and did an interview with CNN. And I hit several third rails that CNN lost their mind on, but this was one of them. And so the woman, Dana Bash, spends like 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes grilling me on how this was just a conspiracy. But then I explained to her a lot of facts from here exact quotes from Democratic strategists. And then she just pauses and she says, well, I'm not going to use the word, as in Great Replacement theory. But let's just say for a second, let's suppose what you're saying is true. What's so wrong with that? Which I thought was a brilliant moment, because that's exactly the debate we should have been having the whole time. But that doesn't happen anymore. And part of my job in this is I think sometimes many conservatives are a little sloppy when they talk about these concepts. I think we need to speak about these with precision. But once we do, I think we can have honest debate in this country that we're not having.
So I remember them saying, when I used to vote Democratic, I remember them saying, especially about Texas, that demographics is destiny, which I think is just another way of saying replacement theory. Well, Van Jones really took exception to when you said that, and I want to play that right now.
Smug, condescending way that he just spews this poison out is very, very dangerous, because he won't stop Trump, but he's going to outlive Trump by about 50 years. And you're watching the rise of an American demagogue that is a very, very despicable person. Yeah. And I was shaking listening to him talk, because a lot of people don't know that is one step away from Nazi propaganda coming out of his mouth.
Wow, so you literally made Van Jones shake. You caused a Jones quake. I don't know if you know that. It's nice, but I think it's nice of him to say you're going to live long, though. I bet he can tell you work out.
Richter scale of 8. That's the kind of shake we got into Van Jones. There's a funny thing. I hadn't paid attention to this guy until a bunch of people sent me that clip, and I saw it on social media. And so who's this Van Jones character? I discovered something funny, actually, which is interesting to bring this full circle. One of the things that I said on that debate stage, which was this supposed conspiracy theory, it's just a statement of fact, actually, based on declassified documents, was that the U.S. government was not straightforward with the American people about what really happened on 9/11, that there was Saudi Arabian involvement because a Saudi intelligence agent absolutely received 2 of the hijackers. It's a side point, not a core point of this presidential campaign. But the funny thing is, to bring this full circle, Van Jones is calling me a conspiracy theorist. He actually got booted from the Obama White House for actually questioning some of the official narratives on 9/11. So it's funny how these things change.
I remember that. I forgot about that.
So I do.
It's
I remember.
Interesting. So it's fascinating as heck, And so I was just like, who's this Van Jones guy? he seems to sound like a clown and a joker to me. But I always give people. I always have a sense of curiosity about people.
Shill.
He's not a clown. He's not that funny, but he is a paid shill. And here's what you
character Van Jones on CNN afterwards saying, "This is the rise of an American demagogue who's going to live 50 years longer than Trump. This is dangerous. I am shaking." That's what he says. Just shut the up. At a certain point, just shut the up.
Okay, language, but I want to just show you this because Van Jones actually did say exactly the thing that you're claiming the left was saying. And here, let me play it for you.
That's basically the request from the racial justice left, is that we want the white majority to go from being a majority to being a minority and like it. That's a tough request. And the reality is that change is hard. Change that you want is hard. Change that is good is hard.
Boy, talk about the pot calling the kettle smug.
Be careful with that, or you're going to get yourself in some trouble.
So he calls himself the racial justice left. I thought the whole problem with the justice system was how overly racial it was in the first place. But here we are. So there he is saying the exact thing that you said, and he's calling you a Nazi for basically quoting him. How do you respond to that?
I respond to that by saying the hypocrisy is rank, but it's familiar. I mean, you saw this in the critical race theory debates around schools as well, right? Because they would say conservatives want to ban critical race theory, and then they would say, oh, that's not critical race theory, we're treating to kindergartners. It's something else. Well, okay, fine. This is where conservatives, I think, got to be a little more precise, and that's why I see my role in this as actually hitting the nail a little bit more on the head. But they're good at trolling conservatives by effectively saying the very thing that is true. It's a conspiracy theory when your opponents say it, a conservative says it, but it's just a policy statement when you say it. And so I think that the left has always been verbally, at least at verbal jujitsu, maybe thought of themselves smugly as being a half step ahead. I don't let them get away with that. And so I believe in having the debates on the merits, use their own words, take them at their own word, and then let's actually talk about whether this is right or wrong policy. I think it's wrong policy. But either way, we should be able to air that dialogue instead of actually avoiding the debate by labeling it racist or xenophobic or homophobic or transphobic or dangerous or climate denier or making Van Jones shake. That's not a basis for eliminating an argument. And, that's the way I roll.
You're sounding very white supremacy, but
I'm sure I look like it to you, too.
You're the worst.
That isn't the white supremacist calling the kettle brown.
Have you been called that yet?
You haven't been called.
It's come up a couple of times. Oh. I asked them if they actually turned on their camera feature when they were talking to me.
Okay. I want to shift gears and talk about COVID. And here you are. Recently, you came out in support of the Canadian truckers, right? The Freedom Convoy truckers. Truckers aren't just haulers of goods. They're guardians of our way of life and guardians of freedom of our highways. Last year, the Canadian Freedom Convoy taught the world a valuable lesson about the power of civil protest against an out-of-control totalitarian government. On Thursday, December 21st, join me in Walcott at Iowa 80, the world's largest truck stop, where I will lay out my detailed plan for how we support our truckers and our supply chain while ensuring freedom for all. So just go ahead and tell me, were you always on board for the truckers? Did it take you a while to wake up to what was happening? And
no, I didn't just come out with it. I actually was on Bill Maher's show right as it was playing out. Actually, I don't know if it was about a year ago or whenever it was, a little over a year. And I said the same thing back then, that this is the great reset on one side versus the great uprising on the other. And, a big part of this is not just a U.S. issue. It's a transnational issue. You've seen equivalent movements in Western Europe and here in the United States. And so, I said that to Bill Maher at the time. And to my pleasant surprise, he actually was more receptive to that argument than I expected. But I think one of the things that happened in that situation that bothers me that's relevant to policy today is that they actually used the back door, not the front door, but the back door of locking their access to their bank accounts. Excuse me. I hate this so much I'm allergic to it.
Yeah.
They used I would say a financial backdoor use of force to suppress that Freedom Convoy across Canada. And these are cross-border truckers, so there's a relevance to the United States too. That's one of many reasons why I'm against a central bank digital currency in the United States. I've been one of the leading opponents in the United States and probably in the West against the rise of this so-called ESG movement, which is really an alternative social credit scoring system that uses weaponization of financial markets to get people to do what the government couldn't get them to do directly through policymaking. And that's a bit of what we saw with the Freedom Convoy.
So, tip of the hat, bravo to you on that. Here, I want to ask you about this because you say the variants are more likely to emerge with greater transmission. It's correct, but she's also wrongly assumes that slowing the spread in the United States, which enjoys widespread vaccination, will reduce the development of new variants. But new variants aren't emerging in the United States. They're emerging in places with a higher percentage of unvaccinated individuals. Those variants are the ones that have the greatest potential to drift and possibly shift away from the strain the initial vaccines were designed to protect against. Those strains won't disappear with masking and social distancing policies, but the efficacy of vaccines will. So, what was your stance exactly on that? Because the first time I read that,
you just got to read it pretty carefully.
It sounds to me like you're kind of blaming the unvaccinated for the variants.
No. Actually,
Okay.
just read it carefully to understand. I mean, it's a very technical piece, and a lot of people, get.
Okay.
I mean, we live in a Twitterified world. People don't have. I don't know about how much you know about my background. I studied molecular biology in undergrad. I developed a number of medicines that are FDA approved, and so wearing a very different hat. To get into technical detail, here's the point I was making. New variants are not necessarily a bad thing. The title of that article was Slow It Down, ? No, let it spread or let it rip. That was the title. And so the whole premise was, you want to know the best way out of the COVID pandemic? Actually let it spread. You get serially milder and milder strains. That would have taken care of the pandemic. I was really criticized when I wrote that. I mean, a lot of people on the left called me calling like a death cultist or calling for death in the United States. Actually, what did you end up seeing later on? That's exactly what got us over the pandemic. And so in the early stages of the pandemic, I will say that I was less skeptical of the vaccine than I am now. And a lot of the facts have come out now, especially on the safety side of things. I did get the first 2 shots. I regret it. As a young, healthy man, I had no reason to. My only reason to is I couldn't fly around. And, if you had to get on an airplane or otherwise, you had to show double vaccination. And so I did it as a matter of convenience. I wouldn't do it again, and we've kept our kids the heck away from it. But when you think about the actual right policy, the whole idea of new variants, they were serially milder and milder. If we had just let it rip sooner, we would have gotten it through sooner too. Other countries actually had that experience and were actually a lot smarter about it than the United States. We would have gotten through the pandemic a lot sooner if we didn't have the lockdowns. And actually, if we didn't have the vaccine policies combined with the lockdowns, which in many ways was the worst of all worlds. And so, that was the point. If you just look at the title of the article, it's exactly what it said.
Okay.
Don't slow it down, let it spread is what it said.
You got it right. I had Dr. Robert Malone here on my show in the summer of 2021. He explained that to us. And so we were about at least a year and a half or 2 years ahead of everybody else in the media on that. So it's good to see that you were on that too. So congratulations on that. That exactly is how it should have went. It didn't go. Are you for prosecuting Fauci because he lied to Congress about funding the gain of function by research? He did it twice. I saw him twice.
Yeah.
Not only did he lie about that, but he lied about masks. He lied about herd immunity. He lied about natural immunity. He lied about the efficacy of the transmission, contraction, all that stuff. He lied about everything. Are you for prosecuting him? Because I am.
Yeah, so I am, but narrowly on this, because I'm against weaponizing the justice system or anything else. A lot of the things you name, you could say that they're just things he didn't know, right? He didn't know about what the transmission rate was or whatever. But on funding the origin of the pandemic, on actually using U.S. taxpayer money to fund through the back door what was banned here in the United States, that's a violation of law. So based on the public facts we have, it looks like that's exactly what happened. I'm always a fan of letting the justice system proceed. And if there are other facts to the contrary that come out at a trial or otherwise, I'm always open to having my mind changed. But right now, that looks pretty damning. And I do think we need accountability. So would I support an investigation to get to the bottom of it? Absolutely, I would. And would I let the court system do what it's supposed to do without prejudging the outcome? Of course. I'm always a person who believes in letting the court system run its course. But is an investigation warranted here? Should we absolutely take a look at this just like you would for any other criminal breaking the law based on the facts that we see? It does look like he broke the law to use taxpayer money to fund gain of function research, which is banned in the United States, but to intentionally do it through the back door in a way that led to a global pandemic. We have to get to the bottom of that. And without accountability, you can expect far worse in the future. So I also favor holding China accountable for certain of the decisions they made in, I believe, quasi-purposely allowing the global spread of something that was already spreading in China. I think it's clear that they made certain decisions that they need to be held accountable for, but I can't just hold China accountable if we're not holding the bad actors here accountable as well. So that's what I favor.
So what is your position on Julian Assange?
Pardon, day one.
Okay, moving on.
I've said that I have a long list of day one pardons. He's on it. And the reason why is, among other reasons, Chelsea Manning, the government, employee who leaked to Julian Assange, had her sentence commuted, effectively got pardoned by President Obama. Why? Because she's transgender. I have doubts of whether she's transgender or not. She might just be smart, knowing that's exactly what you had to claim to be in order to be a politically favored member to get clemency from the Obama administration. But regardless, Julian Assange, the guy who just published it, sitting in foreign exile in some prison, that's wrong. He's on my, and it's a not small list of day one pardons, but he's on my list of people who will get pardoned, and he will be a free man in the United States of America on January 20th, 2025.
So let's move on to Israel. Here's what you tweeted about it. I'll give you a chance to clarify anything you want. You say, now is the moment for Israel to return to its founding premise. The Jewish state has an absolute right to exist, a divine gift gifted to a divine nation, charged with a divine purpose. Israel has an absolute and unequivocal right and responsibility to defend itself to the fullest, applying the only language its adversaries understand, the language of force. And what would David Ben-Gurion say? Don't depend on anyone else's fleeting sympathies or permission to do it. If Israel wants to destroy Hamas, Israel should go ahead and destroy Hamas. If Israel wants to destroy Hezbollah, Israel should go ahead and destroy Hezbollah. Good luck. If Israel and Mossad want to pull off Munich 2.0 and take out every last leader of Hamas, wherever they may be hiding, from Doha to Dresden, and host a red wedding at the Four Seasons in Qatar the next time Hania and Mashal show up, they should go ahead and do it. So it sounds great, except for the part of Hezbollah. But so we don't have to wonder what Ben-Gurion would say. We could just read his quotes. Let me just read a couple to you. We must expel Arabs and take their places. And if we have to use force, not to dispossess the Arabs of the Negev and Transjordan, but to guarantee our own right to settle in those places, then we have force at our disposal. Let us not ignore the truth among ourselves. Politically, we are the aggressors, and they defend themselves. The country is theirs because they inhabit it, whereas we want to come here and settle down. And in their view, we want to take away from them their country. Behind the terrorism is a movement which, though primitive, is not devoid of idealism and self-sacrifice. So doesn't that kind of blow your argument out of the water? I just quoted that guy, and he's saying that we're taking their land.
Here's my view on it. And I wanted to let you finish that so I could tell you what my view is. And you can look at the totality of what I've said here. I have a radical revelation. I'm running for president of the United States, not for the president of Israel or any other country. And I know some people running for U.S. president mix that up a little bit. I don't. I'm pretty clear about which country I'm running to be president of. And my view is, against that backdrop, Israel's an ally. Israel should be allowed to do what Israel needs to defend itself, and also to make its own determinations. But this is all against the backdrop of me being probably the only person in the GOP field that's actually been clear about this. We should not be getting involved in that. I am against the $16 billion or $14 billion aid package for this specific war. I think that's better for Israel and better for the United States. So my view is this. I think that Israel's founding premise is it has the right to exist. David Ben-Gurion would have said, without the sympathies of the West and without the micromanagement of the West. Great. I agree with that. I think that Israel does have the right to exist. I would stand diplomatically for Israel's right to defend itself, but I don't think the U.S. should be militarily intervening in this war. And against that backdrop, yes, I have a lot to say diplomatically in favor of what Israel decides to do. And there's a whole debate within Israel's own government. Keep in mind that not everybody in Israel's own government agrees with what they should be doing. If only the American press actually laid, I would say, the same type of critical inquiry of Bibi's own leadership in Israel that the Israeli press is. There's a lot of debate for Israel to have, but that's Israel's decision to make, not ours. And so I think we muddy the waters when we're engaging militarily or financially in this specific war, or B, trying to play armchair quarterback from any direction. So my view is, when I was asked about my opinion on what I believe of Israel, I love Israel as a country. I believe in Israel's right to exist. I believe Israel is an ally of the U.S., and our job is to stand diplomatically for its right to self-defense. But I'm against, and I think I'm alone, maybe Thomas Massey, in the Congress or whatever, but in the GOP amongst presidential candidates, I'm alone in saying we should not interfere in this specific conflict, diplomatically give them the air cover they need to get their job done. Let Israel make the decisions it needs to make. That's better for the United States, better for Israel, doesn't muddy the waters, and that's where I'm at. So hopefully at least that's clear to you about my position.
Well, that's certainly a little better of a position than most of the people running for president, including Joe Biden. But
or RFK or anyone else. I mean, I think, frankly, or much of the Republican Party, frankly. And
or
so
Van
I think
Jones.
or Van Jones.
Yeah.
But
I'm shaking. I'm shaking that you said that.
And let me just clarify what I said earlier when I was reading your statement. I said that sounds great. I was being sarcastic because I want to show you when you say the right to self-defense. Danny Haifong tweeted this out today. He says that Israel is destroying entire neighborhoods in Gaza instantly. So let's just watch this. So this is boom. So that doesn't look like self-defense to me. That looks like genocide is what they're actually trying to do. And I just want. So do you think that's what that is? Do you think that is?
I got to confess, I'm looking at a camera, not at what you just put up. But I'm familiar with the kinds of images you're probably putting up.
Okay, right. So it looked like they blew up an entire neighborhood at once. And so you've seen what they've been doing, and you see the game that they're playing. They told everybody to get out of the north of Gaza and go to the south, and then they started bombing them in the south. They're bombing hospitals, they're bombing schools, UN refugee camps, they're bombing everything, and they're slaughtering. So self-defense it does not mean that you get to relentlessly slaughter the enemy of your children in perpetuity, because that's what they're doing. So what would you say to that?
I come back to a simple principle. Yeah, I mean, I'm being lighthearted about a serious topic, but I'm doing it in the interest of clarity. I'm running for president of the United States, not the president of Israel or another Middle Eastern country. And I think part of what's happened in Ukraine and a lot of other places too, is we create this ambiguity that creates a moral hazard, which the U.S. by being ambiguous, but being sort of half in, half out, and sort of intervening, sort of providing backing, distort the decisions that other countries make. And so my view is we should be clear. Israel's not the same as Ukraine. We diplomatically stand with Israel in a strong way, in a foundational way, as a basic ally of the United States in the Middle East. But we should not be intervening in this war. It's not our job to play global policeman. And I think that when I say that, that applies in multiple different senses. I don't think we should be further engaging in this war in Ukraine. I think that creates moral hazard for Ukraine to do the kinds of things that Ukraine otherwise wouldn't have done. Remember, Zelensky wanted to negotiate a deal in the first 6 months of this war before the West intervened and goaded him to fight even more. So my view is we're at our worst when we're engaging willy-nilly, waddling into some conflict. It's like you're sloppily waddling into some glass shop, breaking glass, leave places like Iraq to Afghanistan arguably worse off than they were when we showed up. My view is this. Diplomatically stand for our allies to be able to defend themselves. Israel has the ability to do it. There are decisions for Israel to make. There are risks and there are consequences of certain decisions they may make vis-a-vis their adversaries in the Middle East. Let Israel make its own decisions instead of playing armchair quarterback or backseat quarterback or whatever the idiom is, backseat quarterbacking, armchair advising what somebody else should do. My job is to take care of this country. And so I would tell Bibi, you smoke the terrorists on your southern border. If they're threatening you, great. We have our own problem at our own southern border. I'm going to deal with that here. We diplomatically stand for your right to do it without the UN or anybody else, or the EU or the US for that matter, psychoanalyzing and backseat quarterbacking what you're supposed to do. That's what I would say.
So you said it several times that you diplomatically stand with Israel's right to defend themselves. Do you think what they're doing is called defending themselves?
So look, I think that then you get into, complicated.
Not that complicated.
Right now, they're responding to an attack, right? So you can't just take a snapshot of what they're doing.
Yeah, you can.
When actually what you see is a hostile attack by Hamas. I think what Hamas did do to Israel was medieval. It was immoral. It was wrong. It was ghastly. It not only deserves to be condemned, it deserves to be responded to. And I think Israel has a right and responsibility to respond to that. So I think that it's not some even false moral equivalence somebody's supposed to draw if you're just looking at this not in the sense of what should the U.S. do, but just from the sense of what is the right thing or what is the sense of justice here. I don't think that, you count up the number of civilians that Hamas killed and you count the number of deaths on the other side and say somehow that's a moral tabulation that's even. It's not. One side innocently went in to kill innocent civilians. The other side has a right to achieve deterrence for the future and make sure that doesn't happen again. But Israel needs to make that decision on its own terms. I don't think that the U.S. should be intervening in this situation, which it's interesting. The direction that I sense you're, pushing me on or applying pressure is very different from what I've been experiencing for most of this race from within the Republican Party, which has been in the other direction that I'm not, signing some blank check to Israel, which is most of the criticism that I've taken. So it's interesting and I think that it's edifying to sort of get a slightly different, being pushed it from slightly different direction. But I'm consistent no matter who I'm talking to here. Yes, we diplomatically stand for Israel's right to do what it needs to, but it's not our job to play policemen and second guess their decisions, just like it's not our job to play policemen in other parts of the world either.
Well, when you say that they have a right to respond to the attack on October 7th, you're starting the story in the third act, just like the people who support the Ukraine war start the story in the third act with Putin's invasion of the Donbass when he invaded not to start a war, but to end one. And so you know how to tell that story, but you don't want to tell this story. And you say you don't.
This story is long and complicated.
Yes,
and I don't
exactly.
Think it's the job of the United States to be. I don't think it's our job. I just have I have a really simple view on the role of U.S. leadership, and I think it's the one that George Washington shared. When we're talking about David Ben-Gurion in Israel, why don't we talk about George Washington in this country? He's our founding father, our first president. Well, what would he say? What did he say in his 1796 farewell address? We don't want foreign entanglements that don't advance our own interest. So there's two guiding principles for me. One is the people who we elect to run our own government should be the ones who actually run our own government, not an unelected bureaucracy which runs the show today. And the second principle is that the people who we elect to run that government owe a moral duty to the citizens of this nation, not any other one, but of this nation. And so I'm far more concerned and in-depth focused on economic mobility and the border crisis in the United States and the rise of violent crime in this country and taking care of our own citizens who are $34 trillion in debt while we're handing out foreign aid willy-nilly to other countries whose national debt per person is less than ours. I don't think it is my job to be some sort of moral arbiter trying to play God, adjudicating thousands of years of history in some other part of the world that I don't think that we should be militarily engaged in the first place. And yes, I do think that everyone has a role to play, but I'm not running for president of the world. I'm running for president of the United States. And I think that that moral clarity matters. As a father, my moral duty is to my two sons and to my family. And as much as I do care for people who live in some other neighborhood at 300 miles away, if I could do some good there on a charitable basis, I would. My moral duty is to my family. Well, as a president of the United States, my moral duty is to the citizens of this country, not any other one. And so I've been pretty consistent on that.
Okay, so
and I am a student of history, and I could have a detailed intellectual discussion with you going back in different parts of the world, from what's going on in Armenia and Azerbaijan that no one's talking about, to Israel, to Ukraine, and that's fine. But the hat I'm wearing right now is a guy who's looking to lead this country. I don't think it's our job to intervene in conflicts unless it directly relates to the U.S. interest.
I could agree with you on that, but you have to have moral leadership on what's happening when an ally of us that we do support financially is committing a genocide right out in the open, and but you will be appointing hold on. You will be appointing the UN ambassador, and the ambassador has been consistently voting against any kind of UN action to stop what's happening there. So you will have a role to play, and so you can't just wash your hands of this. You will have a role in this.
Well, my role is, and I want to be clear about this because I'm not ducking your question either. I don't think the UN should be stopping Israel from doing what it's doing. And first of all, I don't think the U.S. should be even subsidizing the UN. Let's just get to that.
Okay.
I don't think the UN really has a continued reason for existence, or at least the U.S. to continue funding it. That's where I'm at on that question. As it relates to the genocide point, though, I just want to pause there for a second. Yeah, I appreciate the respectful way we're having. It's much better than my dialogue with CNN or anyone else. And so we've agreed on most things. We might have a slightly different point of view here. I disagree on the genocide point. What does genocide refer to? The elimination of a race. Well, you know what? About 20% of the Israeli population is Palestinian. That's more than the Black or Hispanic population of the United States. And probably arguably the best place on planet Earth where Palestinians live the highest quality of life with actual civic respect is in Israel. So I do take issue with the issue of somehow just flatly using the word genocide, which refers to the elimination of a race, when the people of that race live the best possible life in the country that you're calling the perpetrator of that genocide, and 20% of that population, more than minority populations even in this country of Israel's population, are Palestinians who are living with rights within that country. I think that there is a lot of responsibility to go around for other Arab countries, for failed leadership, both of the Palestinian Authority of Mahmoud Abbas all the way to Hamas's failed leadership in Gaza.
Okay.
And so I think that that's something that, yes, involves a long history. That is not the role that I'm running for of Middle Eastern history professor at Harvard. I'm running to be president of the United States, which is why I have my moral clarity that I'm focused on this country without intervening there.
All right, let me get one more question in from my co-host, Kurt, because, boy, I tell you, the way you could spin that into somehow Israel's protecting Palestinians and they have the best. I would not want to.
You're trying to put me in a corner.
I would not want to buy a car from you because you would nail me. Let me go to Kurt. Kurt, you have a question?
Yeah, by the way, I think Vivek's done the best of anybody you've had on the show as far as in these.
I know.
Genocide, they say about the Uyghurs in China, who are treated better than Palestinians, for the record. It's more of an ethnic cleansing, I would call it. Everybody's throwing genocide around, but what it is an ethnic cleansing. All these videos that you see of the destruction, I know you can't see this particular one. Without looking at any of those, the actual ambassadors from Israel, just going off of that, the things they're saying are very scary and crazy. And I'm watching like Wolf Blitzer of CNN. We covered that story where the guys just, they're all, we got to do Dresden. They're calling on Dresden like that was not a horrific crime against civilians on purpose. It was terrorism explicitly. They're going, we have to do that. So it's a little like to go, hey, they have to do whatever they feel they have to do. You point about their distorted choices because the money we're giving them is a good point. Because without us supporting them, I don't think they could do this level of destruction. They can't. But that what they're doing, any other country like China, I'm sure you wouldn't hold back telling China, hey, you're out of line for what you're doing with the Uyghurs or Taiwan. Like this is and I don't know how you're going to be able to.
I'll tell you about that one too.
Yeah.
I'll tell you about that one too. I mean, my issue there is hypocrisy, right? Of U.S. companies that will happily do business in Xinjiang without saying a peep while criticizing systemic racism in the United States. My view is it's not the job of the U.S. companies to be offering moral commentary in either of those senses. Make products and services for people who need them. That's where I've been commenting most in the last several years. To the extent I've been talking about the Uyghur human rights atrocity in China, it's not that it's our job to be the world's moral policeman. I think it's our job to look after U.S. interests. But I've been critical of companies, BlackRock to Nike to anyone else, to JP Morgan Chase, that will relentlessly self-flog ourselves for human rights violations in the United States about the slaughtering of Black Americans without saying a peep about the actual atrocities where they're also doing business at the same time in China. And the reason that's relevant for the U.S. is they actually sent sent one of China's top diplomats, Yang Jiechi, to the Alaska summit to face Tony Blinken. And their conversation was stunning. In the opening statement, China's foreign minister or one of their diplomats is going off about how China wants to see the U.S. do better on human rights. China wants to see the U.S. stop slaughtering Black Americans. And Tony Blinken is just sitting there with a blank face, just taking it on behalf of the United States. When there's actually 1 million Uyghurs in concentration camps, subject to forced sterilization, communist indoctrination, and worse. In terms of sheer numbers, what's the largest scale arguable violation of human rights since the Third Reich of Germany? That's just the sheer numbers of it.
What's the numbers?
Hypocrisy is what I point to. 1 million people in concentration camps.
Gaza's 2 million people in a concentration camp.
Well, I mean, the concentration
2 million is
nobody's committing forced sterilization, right?
And so all I would calories say is, for how much they can survive barely to eat. I think real weird my sense German is, Kurt, stuff.
All I would say for you guys is, and I think you're sensing this too, there's a fight you may rightly want to pick. I'm not the person that you're picking it with because I'm a non-interventionist when it comes to conflicts that don't directly relate to the U.S. interest. I'm not just a gratuitous interventionist. And so I know I'm running for Republican candidate for U.S. president. And so I don't blame you because that's where most of the insane Republican Party actually is, intervening in foreign conflicts that don't have to do with our interest. I just want you to know I'm not that guy. But at the same time, I think that actually I want to see the discussion between you guys and pick Nikki Haley or Chris Christie or any of the other jokers who have been idiotic.
They wouldn't come here.
They won't come on this show.
Warmongers and otherwise in situations that don't advance our interests. That's the actual debate. But I want to be careful not to put myself, just because I'm running for Republican Party president, I don't represent those views, and I want to make sure you guys understand that distinction.
Okay, well, I appreciate you coming on. I hope you come back, and we have a million more things to talk to you about, and especially we could push back on your Uyghur comments, but we don't have time. We're out of time. Thank you for coming on, and best of luck.
This is fun. I appreciate it, and I talk about that in my first book, Woke Inc. a little bit. I mean, we only scratch the surface, but if we do talk next time, we can even get a head start. So you guys at least understand what my views are, so then we can debate where we disagree.
Okay. Come see us do a live stand-up show. We'll be in Venice, California, Palmdale, California, Omaha, Des Moines, Milwaukee, Lansing, Bend, Oregon, Portland, Oregon, Seattle, Washington, Boston, Massachusetts, and we're going to Europe. Do you live in Europe? We're going to be there. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for all those tickets.